Farty Loch Brown, talk to Eamon Gilmore.
Cancorla, this week the Irish Times published figures that it has obtained under the Freedom of Information Act, which shows that prisoners have tested positive for drugs in our prisons 40,000 times over the past 3 years. Now that's in a prison with a prison population of 3,200 prisoners. We're told that in some of the prisons, 75% of the tests which have been carried out have proved positive, and the types of drugs we're talking about, in 25,000 of the 40,000 cases, we're talking about opiates, including heroin. So there's clearly a major drugs problem in our prisons. Now, it's not a new problem from the government's point of view, because in 1997, the programme for government, which was published by the Taoiseach and his colleagues then, said, and I quote, "We will establish a custodial detention centre for convicted drug addicts and remand prisoners who are addicted, with all other prisons to be drug-free." Having failed to deliver on that, the Taoiseach and his colleagues had another go at it in the programme for government in 2002. They said, "By the end of 2002, we will publish a plan to completely end all heroin use in Irish prisons." Having failed for a second time, there was another go at it in the 2007 programme for government, which stated, "We will extend measures to make prisons drugs-free." Now, it seems to me, Taoiseach, that the government, over a 10-11-year period, has promised to make our prisons drugs-free, but what you have delivered are prisons where drugs are freely available. By any standards, your drugs-free policy in prisons has been a failure. I'd like to ask you, can you explain to the House how so much drugs is getting into our prisons in the first place? Can you explain to us why, if the state can't keep drugs out of our prisons, what hope is there of keeping drugs out of our communities? If drugs are getting in such quantities to what are supposed to be safe places of detention, how on earth are we going to keep them out of places of entertainment? And how do you respond to a sceptical member of the public who will have to wonder, given the quantity of drugs which is in our prisons and number of tests which are proving positive, that there isn't some kind of an unofficial policy of keeping the prisoners drugged and perhaps quiet and quietened, rather than addressing the huge use of drugs and access to drugs in our prisons? No matter how one interprets the Taoiseach's answer, we're a long way from the drug-free prisons that he promised us 11 years ago, and then re-promised us 6 years ago, and then promised us again last year. And it seems to me that his Department of Justice and Minister for Justice are not really on top of this. For example, my colleague, Deputy Joanna Tuffy, asked a question of the Minister for Justice earlier this month about the quantity and value of drugs which have been seized in prisons over the course of the past 5 years. And she was told by the Minister for Justice that an accurate breakdown of the statistics sought is not available without the manual examination of records going back over a considerable time, which the Minister said would require a disproportionate and inordinate amount of staff time. In other words, the Minister doesn't, and his department doesn't, know how much drugs have been seized in prisons or what the quantity or value of them was over the past 5 years. Can I ask the Taoiseach in particular, because he talked about everything from nurses and consultant psychiatrists and airport security being brought into the prisons to address the problem. Would he consider allowing prison officers arrest somebody who's bringing drugs into a prison? We have an absurd situation where if a prison officer finds a visitor to a prisoner bringing in drugs, they can't arrest them. And unless the guards are available or come quickly enough, they have to let them go again. So could I suggest that Ceann Comhairle to the Taoiseach as perhaps a start to get on top of the problem of a very large amount of drugs getting into our prisons on a regular basis?